Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Arrow, as well as the latest episode of Legends of Tomorrow. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look at the description down below. I include the time to talk about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Arrow, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Legends of Tomorrow. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Arrow. A lot of crazy stuff went down in this episode, so it's actually kind of interesting because we kind of have, well, for one, the whole Bratva, interestingly enough, turns out they got all wiped out, which is so sad because Anatoly finally got back with the Bratva after everything, because Oliver kind of put him back in that position and everything, and even after all this time, it's like, oh, all that gain back and he loses. I mean, to be fair, it's just more than just losing position, like the Bratva were his brothers, so that sucks. I was kind of surprised. I was like, yeah, you are going to kill Anatoly, aren't you? It's like, no, you're not. So, because it's all about destroying Oliver. In particular, his whole plan is like, for Diaz, is like, destroy Oliver by destroying the one thing he loves, and that's the city. He's fought tooth and nail. Everything he's done, everything he's sacrificed has been for the city, and you destroy it. You destroy his whole reason for ever coming back, his reason for doing everything, fighting for as long as he has been. So there's that. But I love that basically it's like, oh yeah, all of Team Arrow is kind of brought together because it's like, oh yeah, Renee, it's with Laurel and Felicity. I even love that he's kind of like, man, you two friends now or something? Because even Felicity was bringing up the conversation like, why do bad guys always like pick creepy places? And kind of pauses and it's Laurel, wait, is that a real question? Is that rhetorical? And she's like, no, I wanted to ask because, like, you know, you were a bad guy, rather a bad gal at one point in time, so I thought maybe you could give me a little insight on it. Never got an answer to that, but I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, Diggle showed up there because Argus has been looking into this DS situation. The SCPD showed up too. So it's like all of Team Arrow shows up and it's like, oh yeah, each and every one of us has been keeping secret. It's like, wait, what? You're working with Laurel? Wait, what? You knew about this torturing the Silencer? You were working together, blah blah blah, working with the Green Arrow. And Curtis is like, yeah, none of us picked up a phone. Yeah, my birthday was like last week. And he's like, well, you got a party next week, act surprised. And he kind of turns towards Dinah, and Dinah kind of nods, and he's like, oh, okay, yeah, get all happy again. So I love that. But that is the thing. Because they've all been working separately, they've been trying to attack this from multiple fronts rather than working together like the unit they were. It's almost like with Oliver going, like, Team Arrow doesn't exist. I mean, it didn't already for multiple reasons, but it's like Oliver was the backbone to this team. He kind of helped bring and keep everything together all across this time, and it's just kind of like, with him going, it's just like, it all just kind of fell apart, you know, and that, we kind of see that previously in the past in certain regards too, but it's kind of interesting. I like what they're doing with Felicity in regards of how she's handling this whole situation, because like Anatoly's undercover and everything, and she was so more concerned about getting the drive of all the information. It's like, oh, who cares? Anatoly's fine. I mean, it worked out in the end. You got to him in time, and he was safe. But it's like, no, I could have not. But you were the one telling me literally not to go, because it's like, oh, even telling Anatoly he wasn't in any real danger. It's like, I get it. Like, you want to act like John's like, you want to act like I wasn't, on board with this whole thing. It's like, I was, but you said you wanted to handle things your own way, and I respected that. But for you to go down this path, getting innocent people involved, it's just like, innocent people, Anatoly's not innocent, but the fact of the matter, you doing what you're doing isn't something Oliver wouldn't push for this. Look, at least I don't think he would, and he wouldn't want Felicity to be the one making a decision like that, willing to sacrifice someone like that, because your needs are more important than someone else. It's like, yeah, Anatoly hasn't always been the best person. Yeah, him and Oliver had their issues in the past, but I still think Oliver wouldn't want you sacrificing Anatoly no matter what, the circumstances are, because it's like, that's not who you are, that's not who we are. At least that's how I kind of feel about it. At the very least, definitely about the whole situation of it not being Felicity, so he wouldn't want her to go down that route, because that's that thing of like, and that's kind of what Diggle's kind of getting at. It's like, the fact of the matter is, once you kind of go down this route, when your war is over, you're going to have to honestly ask yourself, can you still call yourself a hero with everything that you've done to get to this point? Because for her, she's willing to do whatever it takes. Kind of reminiscent a little bit of the Lena situation, willing to do whatever it takes to protect Jimmy, but Jimmy's kind of like, that's not real love, willing to cross any line and lie to people. Because she hasn't talked to Oliver, about her current circumstances, doing everything she's doing to kill Diaz. It's like, for one, he wouldn't want her to go after Diaz because it's like, I want you to be safe, but also it's like he wouldn't want her to kill Diaz because once you cross that line, there is no going back. because we even see in the future, apparently Felicity kind of went down the dark side, which is interesting because I think I'd have brought that up before, but like Laurel had pointed out, the fact is Felicity was kind of a bad guy. And on Earth 2, like, everyone knows Felicity. She was, like, I guess, like, we're seeing that kind of translate over into Earth 1's future, because apparently she was kind of a bad guy. She kind of cut ties with everyone. She started going by the calculator and stuff like that. So it seemed like she became more in line with her dad, which is kind of interesting because she strove to be nothing like her dad. She hated her dad for everything, you know, he represented. So you think she would do everything she can not to go down that route, but it's like, what in the long run pushed her to go down that route? It's also interesting because William kept referencing it. It seems like he has seen Felicity in recent years. It doesn't, I mean, because it's like in these years, so it's like, has he not seen Felicity since she shipped him off? I guess not. Because, I mean, the fact that she gave him that, so I guess they haven't talked in that time frame either. So it's like, why? I mean, I guess for him, because it's something that comes up where he's basically like, I left because, like, you know, I felt like it was easier just to let go, just because I guess enough time passed, and it's just kind of like, no, that's just not my world anymore, so I'm not going to get involved. It was just because it was too hard to kind of go back and too painful after just kind of being left alone for all that time, and just all that resentment, I guess, just built up to the point he was just kind of like, I'll leave it all behind, just I can't handle that in my heart. So that's how I chalked that up, but maybe that's not the case. What's really interesting too is like we finally find out what the message is that Roy got. It's like, oh, the 4 marks, whatever it is. Dinah knows exactly what it is, but it's like, who put it in Oliver's bow? And then it also turns into the question of, you know, can we trust William? Which Roy's like, that's Oliver's son. So of course it's like, and Dinah's like, that's the reason why I'm asking. It's like, so is it because Oliver changed in that time too? Is that what that's kind of like alluding to? Like Oliver's change or something? Or just because maybe it's like certain aspects about Oliver or they know, and it's like if William finds out about this Oliver thing, or you know, maybe they're afraid that he might kind of take up an Oliver position or on something, like whether it's something that happened to Oliver or someone connected to Oliver. It's like, if he finds out that truth, he might not act, you know, a way that we can trust him anymore. I don't know. It's hard to interpret like what she means by exactly that. We just gotta have to wait and see on that front as well. But getting back to present day, it was an interesting conversation between Felicity and Anatoly, where he was basically like, I don't need your apology. He's like, I'm pissed that you did leave me in that position, but he's like, I understand, you know, as a criminal himself, it's like, the fact of the matter is regrets and stuff like that for him, it's like, it's a waste of time. Like, the fact of the matter is, no more half measures. If you want something done, you want Diaz dead, right? Then you go for it. No more half measures. You give into the demon inside of you. You know, you don't let your demons haunt you and control you. You embrace them, essentially. So, and I wasn't sure how Felicity was going to handle this situation. I was like, oh, was she going to back down after all that? But it's like, technically she didn't at the end. Like, she still had the gun and everything. So it's like, I was actually worried she would pull the trigger, because she's like, normally I wouldn't have the guts to do this, but you made me into this monster. So that was kind of an interesting aspect of it. I was actually surprised that they caught Diaz at all. Luckily, the new Green Arrow showed up to help them out with everything. Which, there's that whole thing about Laurel trying to help Oliver. She's like, I've traded Diaz to the FBI to help Oliver. I wonder, is that her trying to do the right thing, or was she lying just to stop Felicity? I feel like she was potentially saying the truth, maybe. I don't know, but there's another part of me that wonders, was she just saying that just to get Felicity to stop because she didn't want Felicity to go down that route, or she tried to look for an opportunity of her own to kill Diaz because she's just as motivated as anybody else. It's actually kind of interesting because obviously Laurel goes to visit Oliver, and he's like, you know, it's like, I was like, oh, is it Felicity? It's like, no, it's Laurel, the last person he expected. And so Laurel's trying to help him out and everything, but he's like, obviously he doesn't know about the Laurel who's kind of made these changes the past 6 months. So he's just looking at this as a Laurel from season 6, sorry. And so for him, it's like, I don't trust you. Like, obviously everything you're doing, you have your own motives. There's no way my wife would work with you. Hence, another aspect of it too, like Felicity hasn't really gone to him, hasn't talked to him about any of this, because I guess, I guess it's also probably the situation of like, not everyone has rights to see him anymore. That's that whole thing, just because of him stabbing the guards and stuff like that. But, you know, not Felicity, Laurel being the DA and stuff like that, she has special privileges, especially because she kind of pushes for it. So, in the sense of being able to have a sit down with Oliver and having this whole thing kind of looked at the way it has. But for Oliver, he's like, the fact of the matter is, you'll never be our Laurel, don't even try. And I love that Laurel kind of spun it on him. It's like, Oliver from my world had a tendency of not taking personal responsibility either, because he's basically saying it's your fault that things kind of turned out the way they did. You're the one that blasted Diaz off the roof, and you were saying he was dead, and it's like, lo and behold, he's not dead. So it's like, if you hadn't done that, maybe things could be different. And I think Laurel kind of internalized that, because when Oliver said all that stuff to her about her never being the real Laurel, you can't change. You can try to pretend to be our Laurel, but you'll never be that person. It kind of hit her insecurities because of that struggle between her trying to do the right thing. But when it's all said and done, in the courtroom, she made her case for Oliver, and it was a really good case, and Dinah was there. Sadly, it didn't work out in the end, but Dinah, Laurel's about to attack the judge, because I guess it's kind of like, force her hand to give her what she wanted with the whole Oliver thing. And the fact is that she was willing to even go that far, I guess, speaks volumes, but Dinah talked to her, like, no, like, you've been talking about all these changes you made this past 6 months. I didn't believe it until I saw you in that courtroom. That wasn't you just trying to because you didn't know I was there. You didn't know anyone would be listening, and you spoke from your heart. Like, the fact of the matter is, you're trying your best in this situation, and if you do this, you're going to throw away all the good that you're trying to make. And when Laurel confronts Oliver later on, because he goes, thank you, when he realizes that, she because of what she did, the FBI is now going to be looking into the prison of what's kind of going on here, so there's better treatment for the prisoners and stuff like that. She's like, I didn't do it for you. Fact is, I did it for me. I'm not your Laurel, and I won't be, and I'm not the old me either. I'm only me as I am now, so that's definitely going to be interesting. I'm very interested to see where that dynamic goes. I mean, to be fair, Oliver gave her a chance, and she just kind of screwed him over and over again every time he tried to give her a chance. So it's like, obviously, he's going to be a little salty towards her. It's not even just a prison situation. I think it's just, it's probably that, but it's also just like, it's like, once you've kind of screwed him over that much, I mean, to be fair, I don't know. It's the same deal with the whole Anatoly situation. It's just kind of like it's a complicated situation. We kind of have to leave it at that. So there's that. So once again, I don't know whether she legitimately made a deal with the FBI. Maybe she did in between scenes that we didn't get to see. But the fact is, if she did do that, either way, even if she did or she didn't, it is an interesting situation because it stopped Felicity from crossing that line, which eventually, if things don't work out, Felicity will blame everyone for not letting her cross that line when she had the opportunity. Which even Anatoly would probably want her to kill Diaz, because it's like, it's also for his own self-preservation, because if Diaz ever gets out again, he'd most likely track down Anatoly and kill him for revenge and stuff like that. So there's that angle to it. It's actually kind of interesting because Anatoly was kind of like, you remind me of Oliver back when he was in Russia. Was he a villain? Was he a bad guy? No, but he did whatever he needed to do to become who he needed to become. And it's kind of interesting that Anatoly made that comparison. I'm like, oh yeah, you're kind of like early days Oliver in that regard, of all the stuff he had to do in that 5-year period. Especially the later parts of those 5-year periods because of that. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting aspect to it. Then there's also the situation inside the prison where it's like, oh man, that guard was killed, and it's like, Stanley's being accused of, and Oliver's trying to back him up, and it turns out it's Turner's knife. The moment it turned out to be Turner's knife, I was like, there's no way it's that sloppy. Turner wouldn't be that sloppy, because why would he hide away his own blood? I guess that makes sense, but it's like, why use a blade that would be tied back to you in a sense? I guess that's the point. But that also plays into it too, because that's the point. When it's all said and done, he's like, Stanley's like, oh, so lucky you found Turner's blade. And I said it at the same time Oliver did. I was like, how'd you know it was Turner's blade? And I was like, that's so good. Because I've been saying that the entire time. I was like, I hate when I do that, when I don't trust someone, and then it turns out, I was like, no, I'll trust you. And then they screw you over, and I'm like, I knew not to trust you in the beginning. I've been saying I didn't trust Stanley, but I kind of softened up. It's like, oh, I guess he's not the bad guy that he is. Because that's the thing. Even Brick himself said it. You want to say, because Oliver's like, Stanley's a good guy. He wouldn't do it. It's like, no one in here is a good guy. Even you know that best of all. And it's like Oliver doesn't really 100% know why Stanley's in here. He said it was for a murder he didn't do or whatever, but who's to say he didn't? I'm interested to see what this whole Stanley situation's about. Was it him trying to get payback at the guards that gave him so much shit? Is that what that whole situation was about? And he figured he could frame Turner. He knew he could get Oliver. He's like, oh, Oliver's kind of wrapped around my fingers because I'm his only friend, so the question is, was he always like this, or was it just the opportunity of being friends with the Green Arrow? You know, is he getting a little big for his britches, where it's kind of like, oh, I run things because I'm friends with the arrows, Green Arrow, no one's going to touch me type of thing? Or, like I said, or was he always like this before? Like, does this all goes back to the original crime of why he's here in the first place? That's a situation we got to dive into. That's a situation Oliver needs to look into. And I guess my whole thought process of like, oh, Oliver's going to push for Stanley getting released and stuff like that, I guess that's not at all going to be where this is heading. I thought that was going to be it, and then we're going to have the twist of, oh, Stanley's actually a bad guy. It seems like we're kind of getting that already. So I'm interested to see where that ends up going. And then there's also the future stuff, because it turns out, I like the little test that Felicity left of like, oh yeah, like, if you got 30 seconds. It's like, what do we do? It's like, oh, how did my dad train? You have Roy taking the shots with the arrows. I'm like, that's pretty neat password, essentially. But it seems like she has these plans for the city, specifically these specific spots that could be used to destroy the city. In particular, the city, it's for specific spots outside the glades. I'd assume it include the glades too, but it's like, okay, so why did Felicity have this? Like, obviously, like Dinah had said, she had changed. So it's like, was this part of Felicity's plan? Was she trying to stop someone who was trying to do this? I don't know. Because it also, we found out like Felicity was murdered, and it's not like a long time ago. It's like a few weeks ago she was murdered. So it's pretty fresh, which is interesting. Because I was expecting maybe she died years ago. But I think that also puts it in an interesting spot. Because if they said she died years ago, it would have been a situation of like, oh, so that's something we can kind of expect going forward, present day with Felicity. But it's like, no, the fact is that because it was a few weeks ago, it becomes a situation that's specifically stuck in the future. Which there's always the possibility Felicity faked her death. I mean, depends on like the whole situation of like, how was it just information that came out that Dinah had picked up or whatever. But obviously it's like, looking into this situation, there's a lot of, danger associated with all this. But for William, it's like, we all at one point or another loved Felicity, so don't we owe this to her because we cared about her and loved her at one point in time? So I'm very interested to see what kind of answers they're going to end up finding, like why Felicity's putting William all in this gigantic wild goose chase, essentially. Like I said previously, I believe this is all leading up to a time travel storyline, hence who our new Green Arrow is. I still believe it to be William, but I could be wrong. But I feel like I'm not. But I'm curious, like, what this all has to potentially do with that. Because it's like, if that was the case, why not maybe it's kind of a situation where William has to go through certain trials before he can prove himself to be ready to embark on his mission to change everything, to undo the mistakes that maybe Felicity made in the past, all the mistakes that they made in the past. It is kind of interesting. It does make you, because it's like the Green Arrow showed up just in time. It's like, well, did they contact him? Did Renee contact him? Even though Diggle was kind of like, no, Green Arrow. So that begs that question, so maybe he just found out on his own because he keeps monitoring like the group, or is it just because he knew exactly where to be and when to strike, So, like I said, I'm very interested to see where all this takes us into the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Legends of Tomorrow. Quite a few things went down this episode. Obviously, we have kind of two different stories kind of going off at the same time. Obviously, we have Sarah and the team going to Tokyo 1951 because there's this director, like obviously there's this giant squid monster that basically ends up destroying Tokyo. And it's so interesting because like obviously this is like Charlie's first official task with the team, but to be fair, she's not really all for it. Because for her, it's kind of like, okay, you're making assumptions that this is actually like a monster from that world. I know it isn't. Which is interesting because it seems like basically they're setting Charlie up to be kind of like the Nate of this situation. Where Nate is a story, he knows a lot about history and stuff like that. Charlie obviously knows more about the supernatural monsters and stuff like that. Because it's interesting because it's like, how are you so knowledgeable? I mean, to be fair, we don't know how long she was in there. So she probably got to really know each and everything that was sealed inside that jail cell. I mean, that's crazy to think about too. It's like, we see all this stuff that's out of the jail. Like, what else was actually still in there waiting to get out as well? So this is something I'll think about in the back of my mind. But what like, I guess borderline to a certain extent, like Nate would probably know stuff too, because he knows mythology and stuff like that. But it's just kind of crazy to me to think that, like, wow, Charlie is as knowledgeable as she is. You wouldn't expect that. You just kind of being the rebellious person she is. She didn't seem like she was like all for like knowing stuff like that, even knowing like stuff about Celtic goddess like Bridget, which is kind of interesting, which also plays into this whole supernatural thing that, like, because at first I was like, oh my god, there's a giant squid, they're gonna have to fight a giant squid. They had to fight Mollis and everything, so, but then it's like, no, turns out the giant squid is actually from the director. Basically the book is kind of a diary of Agent of Bridget or whatever. It's basically, she gave a book to humans. Basically it brings your imagination to life. It's not meant to be used as a weapon, and it's kind of interesting because Charlie plays a very interesting role in the team in this regard, because she, like, wants to be like, no, you think all the monsters that are locked up in there are bad guys. Even she's like, what's her power? She shapeshifts. To our knowledge, she hasn't killed or hurt anyone, but it's just because she was different, and just at the point in time when she was around, she got locked up for it. So for her, she's giving every mythical creature that's in there, the benefit of the doubt. I mean, to be fair, we've seen, well, the fairy godmother was going to, like, burn a whole place down, so there's that. That was her revenge, and the unicorn literally eats people's hearts, so you can't kind of let that slide either. So, but it's just kind of interesting that Charlie would play that role, and so, like, for one, she kind of gets a little snippy, especially when it comes to Zari, because she's like, oh, yeah, like, you're so smart. That squid is most likely something man-made from you dropping bombs in that area, because this is around 1940, this is around 51, so this is after, like, the Hiroshima and Nagasaki situation, so, and which that in itself actually plays a kind of a role in this, which I guess in retrospect, of course it would, because, like, this is not too long after that. But essentially, the director was in Hiroshima at the time, Shiro, that's his name, and he drew monsters. Like, the monster he created was meant to be a manifestation of his fears, like the nightmares he had about being surrounded by ash and wondering where everyone is, not really, and there's like all the ashes falling on his body, that's in his hair, those are people. To deal with his nightmares, he went down a route of making art, and he kind of blames himself as a monster, because it's like, I'm the one that made this all came from me. But Sarah was like, no, you can't blame yourself. The fact of the matter is, you went through something traumatic, and a lot of people handle that in different ways. You went about handling your nightmares by turning it into art, and that's beautiful. And so that in itself actually changed Charlie's perspective on everything, because she saw that Sarah had a heart, that Sarah was willing to kind of be very objective. She wasn't just going to demify, like as in demon. I don't know if that's definitely not the right word. I don't know. Demonize is what I'm trying to say. Jeez. The supernatural creatures. At least she's willing to at least hear them out and kind of understand the situation first before kind of going on guns blazing type of cowboy thing. It's kind of what I think Charlie initially thought they were going to be all about, but kind of seeing them handle things differently. I think that kind of gave her a different perspective on working with the team, because she was very kind of like not really want to work with them, but in the end it kind of worked out. But what was really interesting that in the long run, because this was all from Shiro, like, they had to get another artist to kind of be able to deal with this situation. The only other artist to turn to is Mick, but Mick has had writer's block. He's also embarrassed about talking about it, because the only person who still knows is Zari, and it's not to the open. It's like, right, I almost completely forgot about Mick's little thing about writing. And so he ends up writing in the book, and he creates Garima. Like, first thing I noticed was like, she's a lady. I was like, oh man, she's, and it's like, oh yeah, she's pink, and like, oh, she's a warrior and everything. And then I was like, she's got 3 boobs. I was like, okay. I even love later on, he's like, I was thinking about adding a 4th boob, and Shiro was like, 3 is enough. It's like, holy crap. But it's pretty badass, like, his creation going up against it. I was wondering if shrinking it would be enough. I do appreciate that it did kind of get turned into a film. I'm assuming this must be the dude that's behind a lot, because it's like, Mick was like, lizards. Like, done with, like, the squids and octopuses, lizards. And it's like, and he's like the king of monsters. I'm like, oh, because his name's like Shiro Honda. I think wasn't it Honda. What was his last name? I kind of missed it, and I didn't realize. I was like, oh, so this is supposed to be the dude who? Because I didn't catch the name. I mean, to be fair, I'm not that knowledgeable with Godzilla and all that, but like Godzilla, all the monsters and stuff like that. Sadly, I'm not Matt from Super Best Friends. He's the most knowledgeable person when it comes to Godzilla that I've ever like heard talk about Godzilla. So this is a subject I'm very foreign with. I know very little even about Godzilla. So it was just kind of interesting. I was like, oh, that's a nice little tie-in like that. Also, the fact is Mick made out with his own creation, which I guess on some weird level, if you think about it too much, it's kind of like, huh, that's very narcissistic, and you're making out with your own. He even wrote it in the book that they were going to make love, and everyone's like, oh God, let's get out of here. Just like, it seems like it was quite the scene apparently. So that was really interesting. Now, on the other side of things, when it comes to all of this, we had the whole situation. Oh, also, side note, I forgot to bring up, the fact of the matter is we see that his writer block passed and Mick finished his book. I'm curious to see what ends up happening with that. Like, will he actually do something with it or what? It'd be kind of interesting if we do see it come back in some shape or form. Like, oh man, it got turned into like some huge movie franchise or something or whatever. I'm curious to see what ends up happening with that. It's also interesting because it's just like, man, because that's the thing, you wouldn't expect Mick out of anyone to be the artistic person on the team like that, but he is. Nonetheless, getting to what I was about to say, we had Ray tracking down Nora. It was kind of nice. It's this little sweet, like, chivalrous moment that he had, and then Nora comes to, try and help Constantine, but doing it would mean having to go down the route of using dark magic. But she's scared to go down that route because, for one, her dad sacrificed his life to make sure that she was saved, and she's afraid that if she uses dark magic again, like her magic in general, she's afraid she's going to slip down that route again. So she was reluctant to help. But even Constantine was kind of like, if you do this, don't do it for me or do it for Ray. The fact of the matter is, this is something that Ray can't understand, but he's like, as someone who uses magic himself, he understands of like, once you go down this route, there's no half measures with this. You're either all in or you're not. And once you go down that route, there's no going back. And for him, it's like, we both know that magic things typically don't end well. But Nora decided that she wanted to do it anyway. And so she ended up transferring, I'm assuming the way it's set up, it's just energy from Gideon and kind of channeled it like life force into Constantine. I love that he was immediately like, okay, I'm about to go smoke a cigarette. And Ray's like, no, we just cured you and you're doing okay. I love that. It's like, that's a little funny in a sad, twisted way. That's funny. But I did like that progression in the sense of like Nora being like, for the first time, she felt good. It's like, I did some good with my magic, that my magic isn't all bad, that it can be used for good, that I can be good. And so Ray was going to give her the chance to leave. You can tell that awkwardness of like, whatever it is that Ray's feeling, I think Nora can kind of feel it too, because there's kind of that little of an awkward pause between them. But he was like, you can go. He's like, the fact that she's like, but your team will be mad at you. And he's like, I don't care about that. Like, all I care about is you. And then she ends up turning herself into the Time Bureau because it's like, if I want to be free, I have to make up for my past mistakes. So she turns herself in, hands Ray the Time Stone. It's like, that in itself shows you definitely being on a different route than your dad, because your dad never would have done something like that. So I think that speaks volumes. And I'm very interested, because I was wondering, I was like, I mean, like, obviously I kind of get the feeling, like, the way everything's kind of set, it's like, oh, Nora's obviously going to join the team, but it's like, is that going to be their choice, or what? Is Ray going to try and convince them, like, oh, we need Nora on the team, which would be pretty dope, because it's like, yo, we got 2 magic users on the team. I'm sure, because Constantine's story is going to come back, and, because even Nora saw it in his head, like, the man, but he was like, oh, it's someone from my past, and kind of left it at that. But it's like, whoever that is, I'm guessing is connected to who's hunting him down. So I'm very interested to kind of, see more of that whole Nora situation, especially because like the whole race situation, it's got to be a little interesting, because it's like you're working with your wife, and it's like, well, the reason why there's so much chemistry and easy to kind of make that happen, because it's like, well, that's your wife in real life, so it's easy to kind of like do that. So that's what I just kind of chalked that up to, and I just think it's kind of fascinating. So, but another side of this is, hey, it's Thanksgiving's. It's Thanksgiving, and it's like, oh, we just put away more creatures. It's also interesting that Gary walked in with one of them. I was like, did you actually catch that by yourself? I'm actually kind of surprised, but I guess it's like, oh, Gary might seem like a bumbling idiot, but he's somewhat capable, I guess. But I love it. The fact of the matter is, it's like, oh yeah, Ava, come over to our place for Thanksgiving, and then like Nate lays it out, and basically Thanksgiving ends up going down the way he says. So basically the entire time we see Nate and Ava literally drinking, because of just like the chaos that is Thanksgiving at Nate's family's place. So that was kind of pretty nice. And then Nate coming back, Gary had a little Thanksgiving get together with Mona. I'm like, yo, and it's like, hey, we're getting more Mona. I'm guessing. I guess with everything kind of playing out the way it did, she's joining the Time Bureau, which is interesting because immediately she's like, oh my god, she knew exactly what everything was. She even knew what food to get to help calm all the supernatural magical creatures down, because basically they were hungry, so that's why. Like, it's like, oh, like they need to be fed. They were just hangry, So that was kind of interesting. I also love, like, why is Mona here? And then Gary's like, oh yeah, I thought she stayed locked up in the closet where I left her. And then later on I come back and flash her. He's like, okay, that doesn't sound right. But that's interesting to have Mona there. But I also thought it was kind of a pretty neat moment, was like, Ava was like, it's too dangerous to go there, to Nate's dad. Nate's dad was like, no, my son is there, and he could potentially be in danger. And it's like, oh, you're being a caring father and everything. That's really sweet. It's like, okay, so you can obviously definitely tell that things between Nate and his dad have definitely gotten better. When they show up, it's like, hey, the situation's been dealt with, so that's pretty awesome. But what's interesting is that Nate kind of gained a more appreciation for his dad, in a sense of like, oh yeah, I finally understand like why you always left during Thanksgiving. It's because you were kind of the fix-it guy. So when you always got calls, you kind of had to go fix things. But then Nate's dad was also like, yeah, but it's also because I needed to get away from the family. And it's like, oh, look at you. And because Nate could completely understand, because it's like the family kind of drives him wild too. So more comparisons between him and his dad. So I thought that was kind of sweet. But Nate's dad is kind of making it like, nope, you're going to get the funds you need. I'm going to help expedite it so that you can get the container you need to hold the supernatural creatures. I guess they're going to wait for Constantine to show up and help put the supernatural creatures away. I mean, I guess arguably like Nora can, if they get to the point where they're willing to trust her, she could help send the other supernatural creatures back to the prison. I'm curious, are they just going to kind of lock them up like the DEO locks up aliens in Supergirl, or is it just they are legitimately going to get sent back to the prison like the, fairy godmother and the unicorn were? We'll kind of have to wait and see on that front. But an interesting thing did get presented where we have Nate's dad talking to the DEO. It's like, okay, these monsters can be controlled. I wonder, is Mona going to play any angle into that? Probably not. But just the fact of the matter is, it seems like Nate's dad is pushing for them to be weaponized. And it's just like, oh man, Nate and his dad were just on good terms. And this is going to sour things. Obviously, he's keeping a secret because it's going to do, it's one of those things of people getting too ambitious of like, we can control this and use them to be weaponized and blah, 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 blah. National security type of thing. But it's kind of like controlling something you know nothing about is biggest problem, because it's going to turn bad. How exactly, we'll just kind of have to wait and see. Because it's really interesting now that I'm sitting here thinking about it too. I guess it's going to be the Constantine angle, but it's like, we haven't been introduced to a main antagonist yet. I mean, even last season when it came out, everything, it was Mollis, and like this is going to be the first season where we haven't really. I mean, I feel like they we kind of knew about things quite early on, I guess. I mean, I guess it took a while before Mollis was really, really introduced. Like, we got to know about him, but he was still kind of behind the scenes before we as the audience, like, fully got to know exactly who he is and everything that he was all about. But so far it seems like there's no real main antagonist. But like I said, I'm assuming that's the connection between Constantine's situation, because that probably plays into the magical creatures in some shape or form, because whatever his whole situation is, it's most likely a demon after him, and it's probably going to try and take advantage of this supernatural magical creatures kind of running around things, these mysteries. So I'm curious if that's going to be the case or not. So we'll kind of see in the end. I was kind of hoping on some level that Nick would be able to keep that book and kind of make some of his stuff come to life. I mean, he is the writer and everything. I mean, to be fair, it can fuse with anyone that's creative. So currently he is the only creative person potentially on the team. But I am curious to find out, whether or not Constantine will try to make use of that, because obviously he's still got his circumstances. Let's not forget, he was actually going to try and make a deal with the fairy godmother to help him deal with what's coming after him. So maybe he's kind of thinking about that, because the fact of the matter is, it's not like he sent it back, he just kept it. I mean, to be fair, was it even, like, I'd say all this, but like, the book wasn't actually in the prison, was it? It probably is just kind of like a magical artifact that just happened to be traveling around. Maybe somebody from the prison had it on them and lost it when they were traveling across time, potentially. I don't know. Just kind of my random thoughts about the situation. But I'm very interested to see where all of this takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.